Hi, welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, I want to talk to you about the increasingly serious impact on the global economy of the ongoing war in Iran, because we're now seeing a number of developments that suggest this conflict is starting to spread far beyond just military operations. We're seeing attacks on infrastructure in neighbouring countries, serious disruption in the oil and gas markets, concerns about global trade routes, and even warnings about potential disruption to the supply of critical medicines such as cancer drugs. At the same time, there's another important political development emerging as well. The United States is now calling on other countries to help secure the Strait of Hormuz, but so far most nations appear extremely reluctant to get drawn into this conflict. So in today's video, we'll go through the details of what's happening, have a look at why it matters, and talk about how this could impact on the global economy and ultimately everyday life around the world. One of the most significant developments has been attacks taking place outside of Iran itself. We're now seeing strikes hitting infrastructure in neighbouring countries across the Gulf. Dubai Airport, which is one of the largest aviation hubs in the world, has been targeted by drones. That's particularly important because Dubai is not just a regional airport, it's one of the most important connecting positions between Europe, Asia and Africa, and it handles a huge amount of international cargo as well as passenger traffic. So it's not just about holidaymakers who want to go to Dubai being affected. So when an airport like that is disrupted, it has knock-on effects for global aviation routes, cargo movements and supply chains. At the same time, there have also been attacks on facilities at the oil export port of Fujairah. Now, Fujairah is located on the east coast of the United Arab Emirates, on the Gulf of Oman, just outside the Strait of Hormuz. And that location is extremely important because it allows oil exports to bypass the Strait of Hormuz itself. In other words, if tankers can load oil at Fujairah, they don't have to travel through the narrow choke point of the Strait of Hormuz, where shipping risks are currently the highest, and most ships won't go through that at the moment. Fujairah has therefore become one of the most important oil storage, export and refuelling hubs in the world at the moment. It's also one of the largest bunkering ports globally, meaning thousands of ships stop there every year to refuel. So when infrastructure around Fujairah comes under attack, it immediately raises concerns about the security of global energy exports and shipping routes. And that's one of the reasons why markets have become increasingly nervous. The most obvious impact has been on the impact on oil prices, which are now above $105 per barrel. To put that into perspective, oil was around $70 before this conflict started. So we're looking at a roughly 50% increase since the war began. And if you go back to the start of 2026, which is only 2.5 months ago, oil was closer to $60 per barrel. So the increase against the start of this year is around 75%. That is a huge movement in a short period of time. And the reason is simple. Around 20% of the world's oil and gas normally flows through the Strait of Hormuz, which sits right in the middle of the conflict zone. So the market is now trying to price in the possibility of shipping disruptions, attacks on infrastructure or restrictions on exports over the next few months. Whenever energy markets start worrying about supply, prices tend to move very quickly. Gas prices have also been rising significantly, and this is particularly worrying for Europe because gas is used not only for heating but also for electricity generation and a wide range of industrial processes. So the fact that gas is used to produce electricity means it's going to feed through into everybody's budget. It's also used in heavy manufacturing and chemical production and is a critical input in fertiliser production. So when gas prices rise sharply, that feeds directly into the cost structure of the entire economy. And this is the point that often gets overlooked. This isn't just about higher gasoline and petrol prices at the pumps. Higher oil and gas prices have huge knock-on effects across the entire global economy. Energy is one of the most fundamental inputs into almost every industry. When energy prices rise, transport becomes more expensive, shipping becomes more expensive, manufacturing becomes more expensive, industries such as chemicals, petrochemicals, plastics, fertiliser and heavy manufacturing all rely heavily on oil and gas either as a fuel or a feedstock. Fertiliser production becomes more expensive, which increases costs for farmers, and higher farming costs can then lead to higher food prices. Higher transport costs increase the cost of moving goods around the world, and higher manufacturing costs feed through into the price of everything from building materials to consumer products. So what starts as an oil price spike quickly spreads through supply chains and eventually shows up in higher prices across the entire economy. And that's why energy shocks have historically been one of the biggest triggers for inflation and economic slowdowns. Another worrying development now emerging involves medicines. Air cargo routes through the Middle East are extremely important for pharmaceutical logistics. Major hubs like Dubai and Doha play a critical role in transporting temperature-controlled medicines around the world. Because of the conflict, pharmaceutical companies are now having to reroute shipments and find alternative routes for transporting sensitive drugs. Some companies are even moving supplies over land through countries like Saudi Arabia and Oman to avoid disrupted air corridors. And the biggest concern being raised right now relates to temperature-sensitive medicines such as cancer treatments. These drugs rely on highly controlled cold chain logistics. So if the supply chains become disrupted for too long, hospitals could begin facing shortages, which means this conflict is now starting to affect something far more serious than markets. It's beginning to threaten the movement of life-saving medical treatments. At the same time, we're seeing a really interesting political development. Donald Trump has been calling on other countries to help secure the Strait of Hormuz by sending naval forces to protect shipping. But so far the response has been fairly cautious. Japan has already said it has no plans to send ships. Australia has also indicated it does not plan to deploy any naval vessels, and other countries appear very reluctant to get involved. Because once nations start sending warships into a conflict zone, the risk of escalation rises dramatically. So there's clearly a hesitation among many countries to be drawn into a war that they didn't start. They want energy flows restored, but they don't want to become active participants in the conflict. Another interesting development on the Iranian side involves the country's leadership. There is now continued speculation about the whereabouts of Iran's new leader. The United States has reportedly offered a very large reward, tens of millions of dollars, for information about his location. And there's been ongoing speculation about whether he is alive, where he might be, and whether he's operating behind the scenes. But what this situation does do is it makes it much harder for the United States and Israel to target Iran's leadership directly. If the leader isn't publicly visible and his location isn't known, it becomes extremely difficult to carry out any sort of decapitation strike to basically kill him. At the same time, repeated attempts to remove Iranian leaders have historically had the opposite effect of what was intended. Instead of weakening the regime, it can actually strengthen national unity inside the country. And that appears to be one of the dynamics we may be seeing develop now. When you step back and look at the bigger picture, the situation is becoming increasingly concerning. We have attacks on the Gulf transport and energy infrastructure. Oil prices are now above $105. Gas prices are rising rapidly. Disruption to aviation and shipping routes continues. Potential risks to pharmaceutical supply chains are now becoming a big concern, and there is a growing reluctance from other countries to get drawn into this conflict. So instead of calming down, what we appear to be seeing is a gradual expansion of the economic consequences of this war. And if this continues, the risks are clear. Higher inflation, higher energy prices, more supply chain disruption, and increasing pressure on industries, governments, and consumers around the world. So this is no longer just a regional military conflict. This is now a global economic story. So I'll keep you posted on any further news and developments as soon as they occur. But hopefully you've enjoyed today's video, you found it useful, informative, and thought-provoking. That's what I'm trying to do, provoke some thoughts. If you've liked what I've said, then please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Don't forget, I'm currently running my competition where you can win my property or a cash alternative prize. Scan the QR code on the screen now or click the link in the description below. And I've got some really exciting deals on the go right now. Thank you also to everyone that supported me in other ways. If you've bought me a coffee or sent me a YouTube super thanks or signed up as a Patreon or a member, thank you so much for that support. It really helps to keep me motivated. And here's something to put a smile on your face.